rapid transits to Mars using the Starship rocket, and some of the other implications of Starship for space exploration in the context of my recently published paper in Scientific Reports. So there have been lots of plans to go to Mars, serious ones since 1948, and they have not put a single human on Mars so far. They traditionally use something called a Hohmann transfer orbit, which is the most efficient way to get to Mars. It uses the least characteristic, or least specific energy, so least kinetic energy per unit mass, and characteristically consists of an ellipse that intersects exactly the orbit of the Earth and Mars. It takes about 7 months to get there, and is traditionally what robots have taken. But if we were going to send humans, you might have some trouble taking that long to get to Mars. Outside of Earth's magnetic field, we're subject to deep space radiation, and in microgravity, we take serious damage. We lose about 1% bone mass per month minimum, which compounds over a trip to, like, if you're taking 14 months, 7 or 13% bone mass loss. Ions from the galaxy and from charged particles in the sun's solar wind massively increase the risk of cancer. They smash into our cells and rip out the DNA. It turns out that if you were to go to Mars, you would exceed, or on a slow transit, you would exceed NASA's radiation limit of about 700 millisieverts. So you'd have very significantly increased chance of cancer. So there's lots of impetus for going faster to Mars, and lots of ideas about how to do it, ranging in near-term applicability. NASA's been focused on nuclear thermal and nuclear electric, which are pretty cool technologies, but they're quite far off being actually used because, I mean, it turns out it's very hard to make a working nuclear reactor in space. You need a cold temperature. You need a good cold reservoir, and you can't bring a lake along with you. So this tech is pretty far off being actually implemented. And the point of this paper is to argue that we don't need that. We can use existing chemical rockets and get to Mars quite fast. So why can we do this now? Well, previous rockets were derived from intercontinental ballistic missiles, and their stages were expended after every flight. Now we have reusable rockets that are recovered and can be used again. The economics of this are pretty simple to think about. A 737 and a Atlas V, similar cost, size, complexity, about $100 million each, but a flight to San Francisco is not $1 million because, you can hopefully reuse your 737. The cost implications of this are already being proven because the Falcon series, the reusable rockets, partially reusable, have already dropped the cost of accessing space from the expendable paradigm. Starship aims to go about an order of magnitude further with full reuse. But why is that useful for going to Mars faster? Well, the main thing is you're energy limited. So if you, like this diagram aims to show it, as you bring more mass, so the x-axis here is the amount of energy you can send your payload to, 0 being escape velocity. And you can see that the Starship that doesn't have its tanks refueled, it can't even reach escape velocity. It can bring 0 payload to something less than escape velocity. So, you've not got enough energy even to reach Mars. But your tanks can be refueled somewhere along the way in low Earth orbit by a tanker, and you have much, much more chemical energy to go much, much further. So here you can see Starship with refuel can now bring about 60,000 kilograms to Jupiter, and easily bring lots of payload to Mars. This is just the energy necessary to get to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. So this is great, and the refuel makes this economically possible. You just could not pay for enough rockets to refuel your Starship if the rockets were single use. It being reusable allows you to go a lot further. So I kind of saw this graph, or made this graph, and you could tell that there's some serious implications of this rocket, and I did some back of the envelope calculations. You solve the two-body problem, which is a lot easier than the 3 or n body, to make a good first pass on interplanetary transits, like estimates. So you can get within about 1% of the required energies with only propagating the trajectory near the Earth, and then propagating the trajectory near the Sun, and then propagating the trajectory near Mars. So I calculated some energies to get from Earth to Mars in the 2030s, and found that there are some good windows in 2033 and 2035, and that generally the vehicle could make it from Earth to Mars on a rapid trajectory, taking about 90 days there and back. But this is kind of not the whole problem. There's a lot more things that need to be solved, and one of the first things that seem fairly obvious that might go wrong with this plan is that when you return from Mars, you're going about like 9 miles a second, and you hit into Earth's atmosphere. The air can't get out the way fast enough. It compresses, and like PV equals nRT, you create a superheated plasma that can just etch through your heat shield and blow you to smithereens. So I need to work out if the vehicle had any possibility of surviving such a fast entry. When you're going on the faster trajectory, you're going so much faster than it's normally designed to handle, that this might be totally killer for your mission. So I wrote some fairly crude aerothermal simulations. I found a very helpful Chinese paper that gave me aerothermal statistics for Starship in Earth's atmosphere at hypersonic speeds. And then I tested my model on Apollo, which does have full data. We don't really have much public data on Starship's entry characteristics, but I can verify that it produced pretty accurate results for Apollo, and then estimated the heat flux as it entered Earth's atmosphere, and found out that it would be probably survivable, and the acceleration was well survivable. I mean, the heat flux it could take, the tile should be able to take about 600 kilowatts per square meter, and I got a peak of about 300. But this is pretty tough modeling, and it turns out that even the best sims struggle to accurately predict what will happen. So you really need real-world data to figure this out. But yeah, I roughly concluded that we should be able to send this vehicle on a fast trip to Mars. And that is like exciting and all, but that isn't really the whole point of this. The real argument I'm making here is that space exploration should be about to change in a very exciting way. There are a few different reusable rockets coming online, and they all have ridiculous capabilities compared to the expendable paradigm. This is the Perseverance rover, the largest object we've landed on Mars so far, and this is Starship, which exists. It hasn't gone to Mars yet, but might pretty soon. The point is to illustrate that like this vehicle could carry all of Earth's scientific instruments. You wouldn't need to fight. PIs wouldn't need to argue over who can send their experiments to Mars. You can just put them all in the rocket. It really does change how we analyze things. It can go to Jupiter in 2 years. Obviously, there's a lot more stuff to be calculated on that front. I would like to work out how feasible the arrival at Jupiter is, but it will be a lot tougher. And you know, it took 6 years for Galileo to reach Jupiter, so this is a pretty good upgrade. These are all of the launch windows to Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn in the between 2025 and 2050. And this vehicle should give us an opportunity to send experiments on a lot of these windows. Much larger experiments than have previously been done. And, you know, that is very, very exciting. The point is to illustrate, yes, it's capable of some specific things, but really, this really changes how we should think about space exploration. And I'm very excited to do a bit more thinking about this in the future. Yeah, thank you for coming to my talk. Any questions?
So is the right way to think about this that once you've gotten to high Earth orbit, you're like a large fraction of the way to Mars in some sense?
Yeah, you accelerate to about 11 to 12 kilometers per second to get to Mars. 12 or 13 to go fast, 11 to go slower. And you accelerate to 7.5 to get to Earth orbit. So yeah, Earth orbit is, like people say, halfway to anywhere.
So you can do that and then refill and then you're ready to go much further. That's cool.
So you said that it's really hard to do the heat flux modeling for these really rapid entries. and you say that you need like real world data to really model this or to really study this kind of thing. Can you like feasibly test an entry that fast?
Yeah, you would just not put people on it.
Well, sure. How do you, I guess, you send it up and then you just
they've already
turn
done
around and fire it back to
so
Earth? Like,
last year they tested it from Earth orbit, and it was crazy. It was live streamed, and we could see the plasma etching through the steel body. It was like one of the craziest live streams ever, and it just about made it. But their calculations had been wrong. It started to burn through the heat shield. On the next flight, they changed. They like learned from that. So it's that kind of thing. It's just like around the edges, the models need to be tuned, and then there's less and less data for higher and higher speeds. So it's even more unknown there.
I actually have a little question. From what I understand, when you are going into faster transits, you need much larger retrograde burns to actually get into your Mars orbit.
Yeah.
If you actually wanted to land on it. Did you take into account that extra delta V that you would need to actually land on Mars from these higher?
Yeah, so primarily you just use the atmosphere to slow down. But it turns out that would destroy you. So you use a small burn prior to entering the atmosphere to slow down enough to be survivable. And then you just use the atmosphere to get rid of 95-ish% of the energy. And then the rockets do the last few percent where the atmosphere would be too thin to slow you down.
Okay, so like what re-entry burns on,
Yeah.
on Earth. Any other questions?
Do you also need to refuel when you lift off of Mars, or?
Yes.